Alright, so in this one we're going to be talking about our text fields. These, I think so far, are some of the easiest that you can make out of the gate. There's not a lot of things you could wrap them in. I mean, you could probably find other stuff if you want to make more complex projects, but you just start with the import at the top here. You're going to come down here, type in text field, you're going to close it off, and then let's give this thing a label. And let's just say, I don't know, Taco Bell. I'm not sure. I can't think of anything. And so what you see right here is that you have this text field. You have the label Taco Bell, which is the text that appears here. You click it. Oh, sweet. So it goes up right here. I want some tacos, damn it. As you see, it slides on over. You might want to adjust the width. But that's how you make essentially text fields. Now, let's come in here, and there are some variants that do make this kind of interesting depending upon what you want to do. There is standard. Actually, I didn't close that off there. Standard, which as you can see is the default here. There's filled, which gives us the gray kind of background. The label still pops up right there, but what it does, it just ends up, essentially kind of like a contained button in a way. And then if we come into here, we can see that we have outlined. And it's just like the one that is filled, except there's no gray in there. Once again, you'll be able to style these all you want to using, the custom theme styles and stuff like that. But this is essentially text fields. They're pretty easy to get up and get going right away. Alrighty, so in this section here, what we're going to be talking about are the variants you could have in a text field. And I'm not talking about the outline, contain, filled, whatever. I just showed you that already. What I'm talking about is the different values that you could give text field to make it required, read-only, stuff like that. And I'm just going to use one text field and then just kind of iterate over that and add different attributes so it's a bit easier to follow rather than looking at like 10 text fields. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make our text field required. So if we wanted to do that, we would come in here and type required. Now you can either set this to true or false. I do believe out of the gate it is set to true, that it would be required, because why would you give it a required attribute and then by default it's false, right? If you omit it, then it wouldn't be required by logic's sake there. So we have required, which gives this asterisk here. Now this may not be enough. You may want some kind of label or something down below that says a required field, or maybe if they just don't fill it out, you want some kind of validation where this turns red if they try to move forward. But that's just one of the easy ways that you could make this required. So say that you want to go beyond that. Maybe they made an issue or made a selection and you want to disable it. We could do that by simply typing disabled in here, which is by default true. You could set this with some kind of use state hook, and we could see that we cannot click into it, access it whatsoever. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make this a password. So maybe you're logging into Taco Bell here, and this is where you're, let's make this Taco Bell password. And so you need to come in here and you need to type out what it is, but you don't want anyone to see what it is. So that's pretty easy. We could come in here, we could type password. We come in here and it's big space tacos is my password. And it just changes all of your input to these dots, which is really nice. So moving on to the next one, say we want to do a read only. Maybe we're using a text field, but like some forms that we fill out, we'll come across them and we'll have the ability to type in here. That's weird. And maybe we want a visual representation of what we typed before we do a full submit, or maybe there's a document afterward. Because I've seen stuff that looks like that before. So one thing I recommend if you're doing material UI and getting used to it is get used to, especially if you're going to do testing, these input props. because these, when the text field renders out, it'll render out, it won't say text field in the browser when you use the developer tools. It'll render out other elements that make sense to the browser that are legal. And so when you use input props, it's a way of injecting extra information into when it renders, which is insanely helpful. Like I said, especially if you need a test, and say one of your material UI components renders into like 3 or 4 nested elements, it's a nice way to kind of hunt down what you need to look at. And so we have this read-only true right here for the input props. And we can see that we are not able to type in here. If there was a value in here, let's just try doing a default value. We'll put tacos in here. I had Taco Bell yesterday. It's doing something in my brain here. We can see that this is read-only. So that's pretty cool what we could do right there. So the next thing we could do as well is that we could make this from read-only. We could actually change the type to number, which is pretty gnarly. So let's come in here and we're going to type in type equals number. And so let's come into here and I'm trying to type L, I'm trying to pound, any letter I can, but let's just do 333 here. Now this is pretty cool because think about, like, you still want to do validation when you pass this data along and you want to put it in a database, an API, backend thing, whatever. But this is a nice way of, you don't have a grab all. If you know it's going to be a number, you're only going to be allowed to put a number in here, which is pretty cool. Another feature in here that I think was pretty neat is, say we have the Taco Bell password right here. We click it and it goes up. But what if we just wanted to like permanently hover right there? So we're going to come back to our old friend input props. Too many there. And we're going to go to shrink. This is kind of what I automatically do when I say something embarrassing in public. And let's just remove the number out of there. And let's remove the default value as well. And actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, is input label props. I'm an idiot. There we go. See, input label props. This is, anyone that's doing a tutorial and they do it flawlessly, maybe they're really good, but odds are they're deleting. Some of the stuff I just do in real time because, like, this is how we do it. We screw up and then we move on with life because who cares? So we kind of have all that done now. And let's see, let's get to the point I was making. I forgot if it was this section or the last section, because all these kind of run into the same here. Sometimes when you have Taco Bell password here, let's just say we have required. We have this here, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe, like I said, we want to put some text below here to signify or give the user some additional information, which is really helpful. So let's come down in here and we have this thing called helper text. We could come here and type, must be filled out. And so we see this now, that this must be filled out. We see a password, and when we click it, we can enter stuff in here and we're good to go. And keep in mind, you don't need to have helper text for all of them, but sometimes when you have a form, you have some data, depending on what line of business you're in or even what you're asking of the customer, you're going to want to be careful about what you use here, because you kind of want it to be as simple as possible, because you don't want people to necessarily think or even sometimes read as they're going through your information. You kind of just want visual cues to guide them along. So that's how you have the helper text there, and yeah, that's kind of the extra stuff you could do with the good old text fields. Alrighty, so in this tutorial, or this section of I should say, we're going to be looking at how to do the multi-line and placeholder default value variants. And I just realized that this text field right here, it makes sense because it matches right there, but we should follow the conventions. Once again, screwing up live, so whatever. So we have the required, I mean, we could just get rid of this to minimize what's going on. So we have Taco Bell password right here, because Taco Bell is pretty cool. But sometimes your users are inputting like a hell of a lot of information, right? Maybe their Taco Bell password is, I really like dinosaurs, and when I was 5 years old, I don't know, something traumatic happened. I have no idea. But sometimes you just have a lot of text. And so if we type in this right here, you can guess what word I'm typing. Starts with an F. It just keeps side scrolling over and over and over again. And one biggie that should be recognized is that side scrolling, going back and forth like that, is not fun. It's a big no-no. You'd want some kind of max length or expand this width, because no one likes scrolling sideways, especially if you're on a mobile device. So what are some ways we could get around this? Well, we could type in multi-line here, which is by default true. Rows max, and this doesn't mean that they're only allowed to type 4 multi-lines over. It means how many lines does it show before it turns into scrolling. So let's use 3. So we're in here now, and let's just say I stub my toe, and this is like the first 5,000 letters I used before I let out the next 3. And we can see that once I surpass 3, it starts scrolling right here, which is pretty neat. And so that's one easy way that you could capture larger groups of information in your text field if need be. So it could kind of go beyond that though. And let me show you how and why here. So let's just keep the row max 3. But we can have a placeholder as well. Where's it at? You click, you see placeholder. Now personally, if you're going to have a placeholder, if it was me at least, I would have the input like shrink to be true, because this is, they may think something, they click on it, and your placeholder example may not quite make sense to them, or it may be revealing new information. So be careful with that. But we have placeholder, and let's just slap a bunch of 5s on there. When we click in, granted, this is a poor example, but when they click in, up to 3 rows max, it shows all the 5s. It scrolls a little bit, but that's how you could have like an overflow multi-line placeholder. But that may not be all. You may also have a default value. And so we have this right here. This is the default value when they come in. And this could be their new password in here. But say you're pulling information from a database or something they've previously done elsewhere on the form, you could just inject that straight into here as such, which is pretty easy. And that's some of the multi-line ways you could deal with normal text, placeholders, default values, and I think it's kind of neat, and it's really easy to get up and going with it. Alright, so in this video what we're going to be discussing is how to make our text field right here. And I changed it to Taco Bell order because the password, that was just kind of a whatever. And for this, I felt order was possibly better, or drive the point a bit further in. So we have Taco Bell order here, and what we want to do is use this text field, but use it in a different way than we have before. Let's say that we just don't want someone typing in here. Maybe we want to turn it into some form of selection service. And that's actually really easy to do. So let's come in here. Let me tighten this up. And then as you can see, we have a menu item up here. So let's come in and let's do 2 menu items, keep it really simple. We'll have tacos, and then we're going to add quesadilla. I believe that's how you spell it off the top of my head. But one thing that we need to do is we need to come into here, we need to type talk about my fingers being in the wrong place. Select, because we're going to need a way to tell the text field, hey, this is going to be selection rather than just your usual text input. And another thing that we're probably going to want to have too in here is use state, so that way as it changes, we could capture the value. Because maybe unless you're just doing this for an example and you have no logic hooked up to it, it's best to be capturing this logic in the user's choices in some way, one form or another. So let's come up here. Oh, use value or use state. We'll just set it to tacos here. Now, if I wanted to, I could remove these parentheses from event and just have it be this, and that will work because it's one singular argument. But whatever you choose to do throughout your application, just be consistent. And if you're going to have more complex applications, it's probably best to have everything in parentheses, because then you may have other arguments come in and it'll just look more uniform. So we're going to have set value here. Event target dot value. Sweet. So we have this. We're looking at it here. Oh, this kind of sucks. What do we do here? We could see our options are dropping down here. And this is one thing you could do with, the make styles or whatever your CSS may be. What we're just going to do is quick and dirty, change the width to be 250 pixels. So we have this here, but oh, we have an issue, we have an error. What's going on here? And that is because we have not put anything in menu item that when we do the on change handler here, nothing's really coming up, and so it's undefined. So let's see if we can start this back off here. And it's very, very easy to do. All we're going to do is add a value. We'll come down into here. Actually, let's copy this. And so now we see that this set, or the set state or the use state, is setting this, what I should say, the value to tacos, because that's the base. And so as we see here, we could select quesadilla, and we're still getting an undefined. And so why is this happening? We can see that the error that I did is that I forgot the R up here. So now as we start this over again, sorry, I had to do a brief little edit there because everything looked identical to the example that I wrote. And yeah, so don't forget to maybe install something that does some kind of proofreading or something along those lines. But yeah, that is how you turn a text field into a drop-down menu item selector. And then this is how you maintain the state of it. Alright, so in this section what we're going to look at are input adornments. And now it sounds kind of fancy schmancy. All it really means is that at the beginning of the input or the text field here, or at the end, we could put additional text, kind of like a placeholder, or we could put an icon there instead. I'll just show it with just the text, because if you could use text, you could use icons, and I don't want to overcomplicate this too much. So we change this to weight and tacos needed. We have our style make this 250 pixels wide. So the next thing we're going to need to do then is use this attribute, input props. And like I've said before, it's really nice to get to know what input props is, especially when you're going to be doing some testing. It may help you out quite a bit. We're going to come down, we're going to see input adornment, position, let's make this be start. We're going to save this. And so weight and tacos needed, we could put down 500 pounds. It's a lot of tacos. I'm sure I could go through that. but we see start right here. Let's come in and change the position to end. So let's look where this is. We see that it shifts it over slightly. And that could just be a stylistic thing for you. Personally, I think it looks a little bit better when it's not pressed up against the line here, but I guess it depends what text or what information you want the user to put in here. But we just don't have the input adornment position start. We could actually change it from going from the end here to the beginning. So we're going to come in and we're going to start adornment. This automatically shrinks this up here, which is cool. And then you could come in and type in 500. Now you may want the LBS coming in right after 500 or kilograms or whatever it may be. But this is a way that you could position text or an icon, additional information to some way, either at the beginning or the end of the text field. And then even within there, you could toggle it. And that's pretty much what adornments are.